What do you think? How important is having some music and a consistent intro in your show?
I think it's cool, but I am also with you. You basically put yourself in the listener's shoes and you said, I don't want to listen to this over and over again. Why on earth would your listeners want to either, right? Don't bore us, get us to the chorus, right?
How do you see video being applied to podcasting long term?
I think that video is the future for podcasting, whether that's a vodcast. I think people will always consume audio because it's frictionless and you can do it while you're walking the dog or driving your car or whatever. But I think that video now is the future for podcasters.
Today we are joined by a professional podcaster. He's helped over 100 clients launch their own podcast. He's been podcasting for over 8 years. You can find out more at podcastbuddy.co, or you can check out his app, poddex.com, where you can get the mobile app. Travis Brown, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Excited to be here.
Yeah, Travis, my pleasure. We were just kind of chatting a little bit before the episode started. We both love podcasting. Super, super powerful. I'm just kind of curious, Travis, how did you get into podcasting?
Sure. So my history, I've been a musician since I was 15 years old, and I used to actually tour the country like a gypsy, driving around. Before cell phones had maps on them, we took a Rand McNally, the big book map, and we would just drive around the country and play shows. So audio's always been a big part of my life. And when you're a musician, you want to learn how to record yourself so you can demo songs or record your own album. So I inevitably learned how to do audio for music. And then as you get older and you see all your peers around you getting jobs and health insurance and condos and cars, you decide, I'm going to grow up and get a big boy job. So eventually I gave in, I traded in my guitar to get a job, and I would commute an hour both ways to my desk job. And at some point, I stumbled along podcasts, and I would start listening to these podcasts, and I just got sucked into podcasting. But I realized some of these podcasts don't sound very good. And I was thinking, with my skill set, I think that I could actually make great sounding podcasts. So it just so happened I went to a networking event and met someone who wanted to start a podcast. Now, this is about 8 years ago. And I said, hey, listen, you have a really great brand going. Let me produce your podcast. And started with him. And he actually just got an HGTV show last week off of podcasting for the last 8 years. And from there, he told the client who told the client. I've never advertised my services, and I've helped over 100 people launch a podcast, and many of them have six-figure funnels just based off of the podcast alone for their business.
Wow. That is a really, really important story. Really awesome story too. Kind of similar to me. I mean, I started listening to podcasts, really enjoyed them, really loved them. And I just kind of started it. And what was kind of funny for me is when I was in college, I loved public speaking. I loved getting up in front of the class and presenting and speaking, but I just never really went down that lane. But once I started podcasting, I was like, wait a minute, I really love this. I really love this. You also brought up another thing, audio quality, right? I think in the past, when there wasn't a lot of competition in the podcast space, audio quality wasn't quite as important. But I think with every passing day, it becomes more and more important. So I'm kind of curious, in your experience, Travis, what are 3 ways that we can improve the quality of our audio?
Sure, absolutely. So I think that because podcasting is only audio for the most part. Now, I know some people are doing video like you do, which is awesome. But for the most part, podcasting just stands on one leg. It's an audio file that you're listening to. So you really want it to sound good and make it sound professional. So I think the first thing that people can do to make their podcast sound better is to take a look at their environment and see which microphone is right for you. So a lot of people go out and they buy a condenser microphone. And a condenser microphone is like your Blue Yeti, or there's other Audio Technica, but a condenser microphone is really suited for a specific environment. It's very sensitive. It's meant to pick up all the nuances used oftentimes in recording studios for vocalists. So if your room doesn't have anything to absorb reflection, you get a lot of room noise. And let's be honest, we don't all live in a recording studio. No. So I think that by figuring out in your room, like, hey, I could probably use a dynamic microphone. Now, most of the microphones on the market are dynamic microphones, and it's a less sensitive capsule, and it gives you more of a radio broadcast, that pillowy, radio sound, and it's much easier to work with in post-production, and you don't have to worry about the landscaper showing up and the air conditioning kicking on as much, and you can really get a great sound from even like a $50 mic. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars on a microphone. So I think that's probably the first thing people can do is get the right mic.
I want to interject a little bit on that because,
sure.
like Travis is saying, picking up a dynamic mic is probably easier than some of the other options, like recording in your closet or putting a bunch of comforters in your bathtub or your shower, right? Because I've seen that happen before.
I'm sure you've seen in all the Facebook groups, people are building these little like forts around their microphone. And I always laugh because I just say like the amount of money you spent building that little fort at Home Depot, you could have just bought a $50, microphone and you wouldn't even need to have that. But everyone's on their own journey. So I don't comment. I don't say anything. I just let people do their thing. But the dynamic microphone, they're affordable and more than ever. And that's the really way to start. Now, the second way is to really sound good is to actually practice using your microphone. So don't go get a microphone and immediately record a podcast with somebody. Spend 30 minutes in your environment, set it up, figure out which way you can face it to make sure that it sounds the best. A good rule of thumb is generally about 3 fingers away from the microphone is going to give you that nice proximity effect. Now, if I get farther away, you're going to see that obviously it's picking up more of the room that I'm in, and that doesn't sound good. That sounds like I'm far away. Podcasting, you want to be right in the listener's ear, right? You're the little voice in their head. So spend just a little time figuring out how everyone's voice is different. So figure out how you sound good on that microphone and document your settings. Say, I've got the gain turned to level 7. I've got the microphone a little off axis so I don't get plosives, things like that. And that can really set you up to have a great start because then you know where you need to be at all times when you're podcasting.
You definitely want to be listening back to it too. I know when I first started, I recorded dozens of episodes and then I was listening back to them. I'm like, what is this clicking noise in the background? I'm telling you, Travis, I was killing myself to try to figure out where this clicking was. And it was actually coming from the chair I was sitting in. When I would shift my weight, it would make this little clinking noise, which is this kind of like white noise you don't even pay attention to under normal circumstances. But for a podcast, it was very distracting. So listen back to your episodes, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's a big thing.
So absolutely. And
Hey, Mark here. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Let YouTube know you're enjoying this video. Let me know you're enjoying this video. All right, let's get back into this episode.
So what do you got for number 3 for us, Travis?
Number 3, I think, is just to learn how to minimally edit a podcast. So there's a bunch of different digital audio workstations. It doesn't really matter which one you use, but I would highly recommend learning how to cut the audio, move the audio, fade the audio. And editing, I think, is one of the most underrated parts of a podcast. Now, there's no problem with putting your podcast out there straight out just as is, but with a little bit of editing, you can start to craft something that is really great for the listener. Now, people oftentimes over edit, they'll cut out silence. Like I think that there's something to be said with a dramatic pause, but just spending a little time listening back and editing it, remember, you're making the podcast for listeners. A lot of people they start making the podcast for themselves, which is great, but there's 2 ears on the other side of every podcast and you want to make it optimal for them to consume and keep coming back for more.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there. It's certainly a process of getting better every day with each episode. And like you said, sometimes over editing can drive you nuts. I mean, I do a pretty minimal amount of editing for my show, the way it's set up right now, both on YouTube video and on audio, pretty minimal. But there have been shows I've worked on where I just go in and I just go nuts, just really, really editing it. But it kind of drained me. Another just kind of a pro tip that I would throw out there. One of the things that I started doing was being much more thoughtful with the first 5 minutes of editing, because there's that magic moment that Pat Flynn always talks about where someone says, I'm going to listen to this, and they put it in their pocket, right? If you can hook them in the first 5 minutes, make that really, really polished, you maybe don't need to be quite as intensive on the back end. Have you ever thought about that?
I completely agree. I think that you've got between 30 seconds and 5 minutes to really get somebody to stick around for that episode.
Yeah.
So you really want to, make sure that they know what they're going to get in the episode. So you want to make sure that you're telling someone, hey, if you stick around, here's what you're going to get. And if they want that information, they can stay with you. And if they don't, it's okay. They can go do another episode, right? But you want to make sure that you don't spend too much time in the beginning just jabbering and doing small talk and talking about the weather. You want to get right into into the meat. Like I'll bring music back into this. So a lot of big producers will say, don't bore us, get us to the chorus, right? So all the pop songs, all the big songs on the radio typically start with the chorus. It's the most exciting part of the song. So if you think about your podcast, you want to start with something exciting to get people interested to stick around and then unfold the story, and you can be a little more relaxed. But definitely what you said about the first 5 minutes is spot on.
So this is an interesting thing. We're talking about intros, intro music. This is something I kind of fluctuate back and forth on, and different shows do it differently. When I first launched the After Hours Entrepreneur, I had this nice introduction. It was about 15 seconds long with some background music, but I eventually was like, as I'm listening to the episodes, I'm like, I don't want to hear this intro every time. So I cut it out. What do you think? How important is having some music and a consistent intro in your show?
I think it's cool, but I am also with you. You basically put yourself in the listener's shoes and you said, I don't want to listen to this over and over again. Why on earth would your listeners want to either, right? So I think in the beginning of podcasts, there were trends. Everyone ran out to Fiverr and got some announcer guy to announce their show to feel more professional. But as podcasting expands and grows, it's just like every other medium. We have to figure out ways to get people the information as fast as possible and get them into the show. So I don't think that in 2020 having some elaborate intro file is really all that big of a deal. So I'm with you on that. I think that you can go without it. I think that you could serve your audience much better by just telling them in 3 sentences, who you are, what they're going to get in this episode, and then get into it. And again, don't bore us, get us to the chorus, right?
Yeah. No, I'm definitely with you there. That is when I'm listening to new podcasts, if they have 45, 60 seconds worth of the stagnant intro, I'm like, man, you got like you said, you got to get to the chorus quickly. I really like that, Travis. That's really great.
One other thing I'll just throw out there is I work with a lot of new podcasters, and a lot of new podcasters use Anchor because it's easy. Anchor is a hosting platform. There's nothing wrong with Anchor, but Anchor offers you some type of sponsorship deal where if you make an ad for them, you put it in there and you can get paid. Well, all these new podcasters that don't have audiences are using the first 60 seconds to tell you to go use Anchor. And I always tell them, you are basically wasting the first 60 seconds of every episode. That's the time that someone wants to really get into this podcast with an ad for a giant corporation that's going to pay you pennies on the dollar for doing it. So I always recommend, and there's different thought processes on sponsorships, but I always recommend don't give anybody your first 60 seconds of your podcast. That's yours to hook your audience.
Yeah, especially if you're brand new and you don't have an audience yet, right? If 10 people are listening to your episode, you're going to get 10 cents. It's really not worth it. So let's talk about monetization a little bit. When is the right time to actually go out and get sponsors? What's that like magic number of downloads where you should really be thoughtful about that?
Sure. So there's different schools of thought. Monetization for advertising is based on a CPM. So it's basically you get paid a fee per 1,000 streams. So until you get up into like the, say, 50,000 streams per episode, you really won't make that much money to send someone away from you to go buy something. So, I'm always telling podcasters there's other ways to make money with your podcast. And I know as podcasters, we spent all this time making this content, and at some point we want to be rewarded for it. So I understand why people would want to get a sponsor in the first place. However, I think that getting a sponsor is like telling somebody to walk into your store and then tell them that there's another store to go to before they shop around, right? So I think that the ways that podcasters who aren't getting 50,000, and I'm not getting 50,000, you might be getting 50,000, but most people aren't getting those numbers. So there's other ways to monetize. The first way is to simply do affiliate sales. So promoting the things that you love and use, like you actually really use, and sharing that with people is super magnetic. And if you can get paid when people click a link to buy the things that you love and use, is a great way to start monetizing your podcast. So there's Amazon, there's all kinds of different affiliate companies that you could start to do that with. There's other ways to monetize, like building your own course and selling your own course, right? I always am perplexed at podcasters wanting to send someone away to buy something else. Make your own product. There's probably something that people ask you for all the time, your expertise. How do I do this? They keep asking you. That's the world telling you, or the universe telling you, that's what you should make a course about. And you can make this digital course. It costs you don't have to press anything or manufacture anything. Spend a little time and lead people to your course or your service. Does that make sense?
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think that for me, the process of being a successful podcaster is this improvement in perpetuity, right? So if you're a brand new podcaster, you probably shouldn't even be thinking about monetization just yet. Just focus on the quality of your show, like we started with. And affiliate links are super easy, lightweight, like you mentioned, Amazon. The Audition, Adobe Audition. There's a lot of good ones, right? But building out a course takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. That might not be day one. Maybe that's in your 3-year plan, right?
Sure.
Your plan.
Yeah, I think it's chicken and the egg, right? And I truly think that the audience comes before monetization. So you need to spend some time, just build a community and an audience and make really great episodes. And then you'll have an opportunity to sell. You have to remember, we're sold, hundreds of times a day, billboards, Facebook ads, pop-ups. And when you stick something like that in your podcast, you're sort of signaling to people what's most important to you. So is 10 cents for an anchor ad most important to you, or is giving your audience either a huge piece of value or some type of entertainment more important to you? So for me personally, I've been approached by people to have ads in my podcast. I say, no way. That's not what I'm doing for my audience. I'm here to help them. That's all my podcast is for. And then I have services and products that eventually they will get led to, but I'm not going to jam that down anyone's throat in my podcast.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm on the same boat with you. And of course, one of the products that you've developed now is pod decks. So I'm kind of curious about this, Travis. So pod decks essentially are cards to help podcasters ask better, more engaging questions. How did you come across this idea? And tell me a little bit about the formulation.
Sure. So the story's a little bit long, so I'll cut it down for you. But essentially, I have a podcast editing agency where I help people like authors and coaches and entrepreneurs that don't want to, do the dirty work of editing a podcast and writing notes. I help them on the back end of their show. And so there's a lot of people that approach me for a consult or a call that they're not actually a good fit for me, or they don't have the budget to hire an editor, which I totally understand. So I decided that I was going to build a course so I could continue to help people that didn't want to work with me and say, I have this course that I distill all of the information I know, and you can do it yourself, because my personal goal is to help as many podcasters find their voice, grow their audience, and, start their own podcast revolution and maybe live the life of their dreams through podcasting. So I really wanted to help people. So I built this course that nobody asked me to build, which is a big
risk,
big lesson, right? So don't ever build a course that no one's asked you for. Anyway, I also subscribe to this marketing theory. I have this guy named Alan Dibb has a book called The One-Page Marketing Plan, and he's a genius. It's a great book that applies to any business. But he talks about this lumpy envelope, right? So if you send someone an envelope that's lumpy in the mail and they open up their mail, it's the first thing that they'll open. They have to know what's in this lumpy envelope. So I'm like, I'm going to use this as a thank you, like a gratitude thing, this lumpy envelope strategy for people who buy the course. And I'm going to put a deck of cards with unique conversation starting questions to help them have better interviews. Like, not everyone is as good as, a Mark Savant at asking questions, right? You have to start somewhere. So I wanted to really get people results faster. So I made this deck of cards as a sort of bonus for buying the course. And I launched the course. And on day 1, I sold 1 course. And on day 2, 0. And on day 3, 0. But people kept asking me, what are those cards you keep showing? And I was like, oh, you mean like the little giveaway thing? I thought it was like sort of a gag. And so I said, maybe there's something to this. So I decided I'm going to do what's called the minimal viable product. We've all read all the business books about starting lean. So I'm like, I'll call it pod decks, because that was the only thing I could think to call it at the time. I pressed 10 decks and I put out an ad on Instagram, and I sold out in 5 minutes. And I was like, that must have been a fluke, right? I got lucky. So I pressed another 100. I ran the same ad and I sold out in a day. And I was like, okay, this is something that's going to help people transform from starting out as a podcaster to gaining confidence, to having ideas, to being able to plan episodes. And here I am today, just about a year after this came out, where we've got multiple decks as products and now a mobile app that you can download your phone and use these prompts to either engage your audience on social media or have really interesting conversations or plan episodes. And it's just one of those things where when I look back at it, I could have just said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to listen to what people want. But I pivoted and I said,
Mm.
okay, enough with the course. I'm going to focus on this. And I've sent pod decks to huge podcasters all around the world and little podcasters all over the world. And I've met some amazing people like yourself just through this little company that was really an accident.
Well, it's a really, I don't want to necessarily say unique idea, but it's just so great how you said, hey, this is the problem that's out there. This is how I can solve it in a unique way that hasn't been done before. And I just think you have you have several great pieces of advice there, but solve the problems that your consumer has. Don't try to invent problems for your consumer, which is a really easy problem to run into. And then listening, getting that feedback, engaging. It's really, really great stuff here with Travis Brown from poddex.com, where you can really step up your question and answer game. Yeah, like it.
Yeah, so I think there's another reason pod decks really worked for people, which is sort of along the lines of the blue ocean. You know, if you have a blue ocean idea, it's not anything that exists, but there's no real accessories for podcasting.
Right.
I mean, you buy a microphone and you buy headphones and you're sort of done. Like, and I do think that people like to buy things and have things, and they're a lot of fun. I mean, I go live all the time and I meet new people and I just interview random people, and I've made some huge connections and got to know a lot of really awesome people just through asking really good questions.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's actually a very, very good point. People always are looking for ways to upgrade and update and get more stuff. And that's a really kind of like lightweight item that could seriously improve the quality of your show, especially if you're not as practiced and don't have a lot of experience. It can really get you caught up quickly. I want to talk a little bit about adding and upgrading to your game, right? Because this is something that I think about is someone getting new into podcasting. You have to find a way to differentiate yourself. One of the ways that I've differentiated myself and the After Hours Entrepreneur is really focusing on video, right? Really focusing on video distribution, like the wave memes that you see out there. To me, they're not super effective, but I've been having a lot of success, specifically on LinkedIn, but on some other channels as well. How do you see video being applied to podcasting long term?
I think what you're doing, and I've been saying this for a little while now, I think that video is the future for podcasting, whether that's a vodcast. I think people will always consume audio because it's frictionless and you can do it while you're walking the dog or driving your car or whatever. But I think that video now is the future for podcasters. I think about 7 years ago, audiograms were like the future for podcasters to be able to share something on social media. But I think that ship has sailed a bit, where audiograms are just sort of noise now, where video, and the human being looks for faces and everything. If you look at the moon, you're going to see a face. If you look at a tree, you're going to see a face. So we're biologically programmed to look for faces. So there's nothing better to post on social media than your face doing a podcast. And I know that can be intimidating to some people because they don't like to be on video. Video is a little bit more difficult. But I think now that this pandemic has happened and we've all been, kind of trapped, and everyone has learned how to use Zoom, I think that there's more people that are getting more comfortable with being on camera and doing it. So as a podcaster, I think that's probably one of many things that is part of your success, is the way that you're promoting your podcast. And it's definitely something I think a lot of podcasters need to lean into, whether that just be a live episode or repurposing content into an actual video post that gets people excited about the show.
Well, yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Trying new things, getting comfortable with discomfort. If you're not comfortable with video, the best way to get comfortable is to start trying it. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. But I mean, the reality is YouTube. So let's take YouTube, for example. A lot of the YouTube content that I consume is just playing in the background. I don't really watch a lot of YouTube. I listen to a lot of YouTube. Why not take your podcast and put it on there? The problem I think that people can run into is they just slap a still image. Tim Ferriss actually does this. I mean, Tim Ferriss, like the biggest podcaster on earth, but he actually does this on YouTube. He puts in a blank image and then just plays the audio over it, right? And then other people like Joe Rogan are more thoughtful with what they're doing. And this is another thing I think is really interesting. Spotify has actually started implementing video into their platform. It's also interesting that Spotify is now is really starting to creep up on Apple for taking a percentage of listeners. How do you see this playing out? Do you see like a huge app war between Apple and Spotify in the future, Travis?
I mean, I think that Spotify has done a huge investment into podcasting because they see the future of of how people are consuming content. I think that writing a blog is still good for you in some ways, but it's not as sticky as podcasting is. And I think
Mm.
that, doing a YouTube channel is great, but it's time intensive and you can't watch a video anywhere. So I think that Spotify probably had a lot of people coming from different tech companies that said podcasting is really the future here. And I've talked to executives at Spotify and Google, and they predict that in 5 years, every single person and brand will likely have a podcast. So I think that they're doing all the right things. And when you look at the two, there's generally two behemoths in every industry, right? There's Apple and there's
Android
PC, or Android, right? And there's generally two people, but Spotify's made some huge investments and they are creeping in on that Apple number. And I do think Apple has some optimization to do with their charts and some things, but I think they'll always be sort of on top. I mean, it is called a podcast based off of an iPod, right? So I think that they'll always sort of be at the top, just as one of the top device manufacturers in the world. But I was actually looking at some stats today, probably the same thing you were looking at. It was the chart of where people are consuming podcasts. And I think that podcasters get really hung up on making sure they're on every single platform. And this chart actually shows you that about 0.07% of people actually listen to podcasts on iHeartRadio, which a lot of my clients say, I want to be on iHeartRadio. So I can't wait to show them this chart to show them that no one's listening to you on iHeartRadio. Just focus on the main things and keep creating content.
I mean, the flip side though, Travis, is like the opportunity cost is, I mean, it's minimal, right? But it's so easy to just get your RSS feed out there. That's another beautiful part about podcasting is you set it up once. I don't ever have to worry about iHeartRadio again. I'm there, That's
true. That's very true. Yes. I just think that when new podcasters come to the game, I think they get a little overwhelmed when they see all those places and they don't know how easy it is to do a one-click publish to a new platform. And that may scare them off from actually starting, or buying the right microphone might scare them off. And as a person who wants people to, be illuminated by their passion and telling their stories, I don't want anything to scare people away from podcasting, because I think we're all unique and have different experiences that we can share with the world. And that's why podcasting is just such an amazing platform.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. I want to talk a little bit about one of the weaknesses of podcasting, and I'll give you a little bit of context. One of the things I really enjoy about YouTube, and one of the reasons I'm really passionate about consistently being on YouTube, is it's very easy to get engagement. Right? People can they can share very easily. They can leave comments that you can answer. There's not a lot of social engagement on podcasting, right? Spotify, you can follow and that's about it. You can share. Same thing with iTunes. Do you think that there's a possibility, there's an opportunity for some app to come along? Because some apps have tried this. Do you feel like there's some social media app that is just waiting to pop for podcasting?
Probably, yes. I'm sure that there's engineers working somewhere on something, because I feel like we may be in the similar age range, but were you on MySpace?
Oh yeah, me and Tom, okay. We're like this.
So I was telling someone a story about this the other day. Do you remember what ruined MySpace?
Dane Cook?
No, but that's a good answer. Bands. So once bands got onto MySpace, it became this thing where all these bands, everyone had a band page, and it seemed to sort of just it changed it from a social media thing to a promotional. And I feel like podcasting is getting a little bit with certain aspects to that point where there's this influx of people just posting, check out my episode, check out my episode, check out my episode. And we need an app. We need a community app where people can share podcasts and they can be found and shared easier than it is right now. And I'd be willing to bet that companies like Sounder FM and Spotify and Google have a roadmap to make that happen. And I applaud that when it happens, because I don't want all of these other apps like Instagram is obviously for photography, has become and in my views probably skewed because I follow a lot of podcasters, but it's just a lot of the same thing over and over again, which makes it not as magnetic when I want to go look at it.
Yeah. Well, I gotta be frank. Facebook, I get almost zero reach on Facebook, but I can post something on LinkedIn and I'll reach thousands of people. So I think again, it's kind of interesting that you're continuously trying new things. If you're trying the thing that worked 2 years ago, I just don't think you're going to stand out. This is why I've been really passionate about working and developing a team to really get serious about going to video, because I think that's something that a lot of the big entrepreneurship style podcasts aren't doing. The other advantage too is it's so easy to repurpose. I remember I saw Gary Vee a few years ago at an event, and he before he left, he made one comment: "Make more content, Dick." That was his that was his. I don't remember much, but I remember that it really stuck out to me. And then he later on released this deck about how you can really create tons and tons of content. This 30-minute video interview that we're doing right now, Travis and I, we're going to get dozens and dozens and dozens of pieces of content distributed all over the web, all over social media. We're going to share this so you can listen to it on Travis's podcast, Podcast Therapy, or you can listen to it on my show, The After Hours Entrepreneur. He's going to share it. I'm going to share it. We're going to have that to me is where the real money is when you can get a 30-minute video and magnify it times 10. Right.
So that slide deck that Gary Vee put out was basically taking one pillar piece of content and turning it into many pieces of content that you put all over, which is brilliant. And I've actually been using you as an example, unbeknownst to you, to other podcasters of
thank you.
There's a couple things. First of all, using the pillar content to make mini content, but also, in a previous conversation we had, you've been investing in a team and a system. And I think that that's something that's majorly overlooked for podcasters is developing a system. It's the same reason why McDonald's can serve you the same cheeseburger around the world, or Starbucks can make you the same cup of coffee. They spend time building these systems, and it makes you more efficient, and your team knows exactly what to do with every single piece of the puzzle, which is going to make you have a wider reach, make more content, and be a happier podcaster. So if you're out there and you're watching this or listening to this podcast, you really want to start to think about building a system and then having potentially a team work with you, so you're not just on Lonely Island trying to do everything all yourself.
Yeah, I'm with you. There are so many amazing people out there that can really help you magnify your podcast. We could go on and on about this topic because I'm very, very passionate about offloading and offsourcing a lot of your busy work so you can focus on what you care about. But my challenge to everyone out there would be, get serious about writing down a list of every step of your process. Keep coming back to it. Keep adding to it. My process is now to 25 pages, single spaced, mind you. Just keep building it out, and you'll be amazed what can come from that. So
yeah, my mentor always tells me it's the who, not the how. So when next time you think about how you're going to do something, maybe think about who's going to do it for you. So
yeah, love it. So we're talking to Travis Brown here from poddex.com, podcastbuddy.co.co. But before I let you go, Travis, I want to ask you some world famous after hours entrepreneur rapid fire questions. Are you ready to rock?
For this? I'm ready to rock.
This is the good stuff. You can also find these on TikTok too. I'm kind of working with my team to kind of clean these up for TikTok, which is another thing that I've been experimenting with, but that's a whole nother story. We have to do this again sometime soon, I think.
Yeah, man, this has been a lot of fun.
Travis, what is a must-have business item for less than $50?
I would say it doesn't matter which one, but some type of planner that allows you to plan out your day in blocks of an hour. I think that if you live by a calendar, you will always get more done than by creating just a list of things to do. So there's lots of different ones out there. I couldn't point you to a specific one, but any type of daily planner that's going to allow you to block out your day, I think is an absolute must-have for any business person.
Love it. If you could only have one social media app on your phone, what would you have?
Instagram, hands down, my all-time favorite.
Dig it.
I'm too old for TikTok. I'm afraid to go even look at it because I just think that they'll kick me out.
Well, it's the new thing. You're seeing TikTok, the same thing that TikTok is doing, you're seeing on Instagram.
True.
With Reels, and YouTube is starting to play with it too. So I think that's, it's not going anywhere. The short form, Pat Flynn, by the way, is doing an excellent job with Reels, crushing it with Reels on Instagram.
Yes, he is.
What is a must-have subscription in your life?
I have a Spotify subscription, and I'm a big fan of that, as well as Audible. I love listening to audiobooks, so I would say it's probably a 50-50 between those two. Just because I'm an audio fanatic and always consuming. So
Audible also has a great affiliate program out there for anyone that's trying.
Indeed, they do.
Check that out. Yeah. Check out the affiliate program. If you woke up in the morning, there was only one business task you could do for the day, what would you do?
I would give my team a list of things to get done. I would give the team the marching orders for the day. Definitely.
I'll give you an A+ for that
answer.
How
about you? I want to know your answer, Mark.
I would say the same thing. It would be delegate. It would be, I now have 5 team members. I would make sure each team member was good. They were clear. I think second in line would be engage with the audience, whether it was via email or social media. I'd make sure I'm engaging with everyone. Those would be my top 2 on my list.
Awesome.
But delegating, definitely number 1. Final question here for you. If you had 10 seconds with yourself 10 years ago, what would you say?
Quit drinking.
Well said.
I spent, as a band guy, as a party animal, spent a lot of years, probably, wasting time in bars or parties and things. And now that I'm older and have children and I don't party anymore, sometimes I think back to how productive I could have been if I wasn't, spending money or resources or time just on things that are completely fleeting. So I guess if there was one thing I wish I could go back and do, it would just be to give myself a little kick in the butt and say, you got a lot to do here, so let's get it done. So very easy question. Can I ask you one question, a rapid fire question?
Sure, please.
If you could look through anybody's email without them knowing, whose email would you look through? This is a Poddex question, by the way.
This is a Poddex question. I mean, right now, I want to say Hillary Clinton's emails. That's probably
a very, very common answer.
I would probably, there's so many interesting people. I would probably look at what Gary Vee is doing. Honestly, that'd be the band. He's just consistently way ahead of his time in predicting what's coming next. So I'd love to be a fly on the wall of Gary Vee's email inbox.
All right. One more question. If you could sit next to anybody on a 10-hour flight, who would it be and why? You basically get 10 hours with someone.
And these are tough. These are tough questions. I'll go with Mark Cuban.
Oh yeah, that's a good answer.
I love what Mark does, both on Shark Tank. I just actually interviewed David Zamarin, who was able to connect with Mark on Shark Tank, got a deal with Mark, and he just seems like a really fascinating guy. I'd love to pick his brain. Yeah,
a friend of mine got a deal with Mark Cuban on Shark Tank. He actually got an offer and counter offered lower than what he had offered on national TV.
I can't imagine how hard it is with the lights and the sweat. You're getting drilled. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
So I won't judge. No judgment.
Yeah, me neither. It's just funny.
Judgment-free zone. Well, Travis, this has been a pleasure. I look forward to watching your story grow with Poddex, and we will talk very soon.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm glad you enjoyed this episode. I've got several other episodes right here for you. Smash one of these videos to make sure that you don't miss out on the tips, tools, and tactics of industry experts. Let's take that side hustle full time. Smash one of these links.